If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, we are back. We've got General Jock with us. I think this one's going to be interesting. So thank you for your time, we really appreciate it. I believe the last time we were at the Danitron Battle School or Combat School. I'm not sure which one of those two names to use actually, because to me it's fairly the similar type of name. So perhaps you can just tell me that which is correct, Combat School or Battle School at Danitron. And we're listening, so thank you for your time once again.
Okay, Koos, thanks a lot for coming back to me, especially with a guy with verbal diarrhea like me. Now it's the Danitron. It started as the Combat School and then the Danitron Combat School. So since I've been talking to you with these conversations, which I'm enjoying, I must say, I've now taken you from 1964 Army Gymnasium, and the last time I spoke to you, we in 1973. So you are now 9 years with me in the past, the past month. As I said there, but before I carry on with that, let me just say a few things here like I did last time, Koos. You know, time and tide waits for no man. And we have tried to write memoirs, some of us. We try and think of times and places and people and stories, and it becomes more difficult as the years go on. And I still can't believe it when I say this. I've spoken now, since I've last seen you. I've got hold of telephone numbers and I've spoken to guys who I can remember were with me in places. And that was 50 years ago. I mean, it's a half a century. Waar het die tyd heen gegaan? It's just unbelievable. But anyway, these conversations will help to sort of, get everything together so we can try and remember it in the future. I must also say that the past 2 weeks, or past week really, I've been forced to accelerate my collection and collation of information because I've actually now stopped. Remember, I was reading certain things to you. My 78 pages or rather 88 paragraphs of written stuff is now finished. So I won't be reading such a lot because I've now spent the last week on collecting and collating all the information from my old buddies. Lee Leclerc hadn't spoken to me for 40 years. And I've spoken to how many other people. It's just been therapeutic. It's been great. So thank you for that. I just want to remind everybody that does watch this some other time that because of the 50 years time span and the time and tide that waits for none of us, I'm not going to feel offended that if you see this on YouTube to come in and say, you got that one wrong, it was actually that date. And you've forgotten this dude, so, sort of put his name into your memoirs, whatever. That's really going to help. That's what I'm actually seeing this as being, these conversations, as helping us get all the information correct after all these years. And there's so much to digest that I've gone through here. I'm looking here at all the books and the photograph albums and But anyway, everybody's going to contribute. So I thank you for that. The last time I spoke to you, I got married and my eldest daughter was born in 1972. And in the beginning of 1973, I was told that I'd been transferred to 1 South African Infantry Battalion in Oudtshoorn. Earlier, I did speak about 1SAI and 6SAI, or 1 to 6SAI being founded in 1962. Part of my research here has shown me the obvious, that 1SAI has actually been 1 South African Infantry Battalion since, I think it's 1950 or 1951. A company of the battalion was in Oudtshoorn, B company was 1 SSB in Bloemfontein, and I think the third C company was in Potchefstroom. But that's got nothing to do with me because I wasn't there then. So all of that is available for people that want to do research on that. But anyway, I'm now ready to go down to Oudtshoorn. I remember packing the little Volkswagen 411 variant. My vrou en my dogtertjie agterin, and there we went. After a wonderful period at the Donnie Combat School and in Kimberley. Left great friends behind. I remember riding down through Bridgetown, Victoria West, Beaufort West, Merrimspoort, and entering the magic Little Karoo, die Klein Karoo. Klein Karoo waarvoor ek en my familie so verskriklik lief geword het vir amper 7.5 jaar. When we arrived there was no place to stay, and obviously, and a lot of people will remember that opposite the Teachers Training College, Southern Cape Teachers Training College in Oudtshoorn, was and still is a caravan park with chalets called N.R. Smith. A lot of people had to stay over in N.R. Smith with their families before they were actually given a house or accommodation. We were welcomed to 5SAI by Commandant Len Meyer, later became General. He was the commander, and the RSM was also from Donnie Combat School. Sergeant Major Arthur Alban Kelmeyer. When I think back, definitely one of my mentors. I was posted to B Company, Bravo Company, and Major J.L. Jordan was the company commander. Then we had 3 Jordans, infantry. We had L.E. Jordan, that's the guy that was at the combat school with me. We had J.L. Jordan, who later was also the officer commanding of Donnie Combat School. And you had S.I. Jordan, Klein Yori. So those are the 3, if people are trying to see which Jordan I'm talking about. He was the company commander. The company sergeant major was W02 Pep van Sail, a legend in his own time, who just after this stunt in Oudtshoorn joined 32 Battalion as their RSM. Great guy. Our quartermaster sergeant was Staff Sergeant Bokko Kutser. I'm not going to give his full name, but there's going to be a couple of smiles of people who are listening to his nickname now, and they know what the Bokko stands for. Eventually, I bought Bokko's house, funny enough. Number 1 Buitekantstraat, it's down there towards the showgrounds, for 13,750 rand. Prachtige huis, 1 garage, al die ander goed wat jy nodig het. We completed, this Bravo company completed their coin training, counter-insurgency training, and off we went to the border. Must have been here in the middle of the year somewhere. For about 3 to 4 months, I went with Bravo company to Sabinda. Now, Sabinda used to be a police base in the Caprivi. And the 4 months that we stayed there, Pep van Sail and Bokko Kutser actually built that up into a beautiful base. They were very good at thatch work. I remember the thatch work buildings that were built at Sabinda. It was absolutely amazing. Thank you for giving me the contact number of Ich van Rooyen, because Ich van Rooyen was then also a sergeant in that same company. And on our arrival there, I thought this is going to be a nice 3-4 month trip on the 2IC. I look after rations and that sort of thing. And the commander of, what was it, Sector 70 in Katiba Malilo, still said that all your platoon patrols, that patrols in the Caprivi, will have permanent force patrol commanders. So as the company 2IC, I had a platoon that I had to take out myself. So instead of sitting there at Fat Rock, I was patrolling for that full period. 7 days out, 7 days in. Rat packs down to, I think, 72 kilograms. I remember moving between, it was Bospire tussen Bospad 1 en Bospad 4, patrolling the cut line up and down with a great platoon of national servicemen. I remember we had two affirmative chefs. Can't remember their names. But when you came in after your 7-day patrol, you'd have a bath, which Pep van Zyl had got somewhere. It was actually a bath, open roof. And they would put hot water in for you and this Colgate hairspray to give you a nice sort of a foam bath. En dan het hulle vir jou 'n boewiese lekker ete voorgerei, hierdie twee chefs. God bless them. Little stories that came out of there. I remember Pep van Zyl showing us one morning that an hyena had come into the base. Hyena, laughing hyena, but that's a groot pote. And those tracks were right up next to his bed. So the hyena had actually come in to have a look to see how Pep van Zyl lying here. En jy weet, die hyena kan jou gesig maklik afbyt, sommer net daar. Maar toe spot ons almal, geen hyena sal Pep van Zyl se gevreet vat nie. That I remember about Pep van Zyl. Great guy. I also remember that on these patrols of ours, we had a Jewish signaler. What was it those days? The B-22 radio, I think we used to carry on the back. Redelike groot radio stel. And one day we, through the long grass, we actually discovered that we'd moved right into a herd of elephants. And we only realized that once we saw the elephants all around us. And obviously, Levi was his name. Signaler Levi had got between the cow and the calf, and she came for Levi. And I remember the elephant hitting him with a trunk, that this whole radio sort of bolt in like sort of, caved in halfway. He injured his back quite seriously. So if he's alive and listening to this, I can still remember that Levi. We still had to casevac him by chopper. Right, then we carried on for 3 or 4 months, and we returned to 5SAI. And there was an eerie experience that we had there because the whole unit had closed down. And there were convoys of vehicles standing packed. The quartermaster stores had been packed out already. And they were all ready to move. I think that was here in October, November. We had to move 5SAI from Oudtshoorn to Bloemfontein, where they would become the then famous mechanized battalion. We had 2 teams, myself and Warrant Officer Saki Yigu. We had the one team with drivers and staff members, and a captain. I was a captain then, Captain Nati van der Merwe. Can't remember who his warrant officer was. He had the other team. Then I took the first convoy all the way through via Hanover to Bloemfontein, loaded it off. There were teams that side that unloaded all of that back into the quartermaster stores. And then we would come back, that team, by train. And while we were on the train back, Nati van der Merwe's team was taking up the next convoy. Can't remember how many convoys, 2 or 3, 4 convoys each. And that had 5SAI transferred to Bloemfontein. Then we had, then I was transferred at the end of that year when 5SAI left. Hulle het my seker jammer gekry, jy weet, jy het net Oudtshoorn toe gestuur, ek kan nie nou weer na 'n paar maande Bloemfontein toe stuur. So they said, you are there now, so now you stay at the infantry school. And that was the start of 7 remarkable years that I had at the infantry school. Now, just as a matter of interest, the army gymnasium that I was in closed down on a date that I don't have now, and they moved to Heidelberg, in the Transvaal. And at the end of 1973, rather, it was decided that Heidelberg, where the gymnasium was, would become the School of Signals or the Signal School, and that the junior leaders, infantry training that we all did at the Army Gymnasium, either Pretoria or Heidelberg, that task would move down to the infantry school. That was at the end of 1973, beginning 1974. And I was then transferred, as I said, I just stayed behind and moved into the infantry school. The officer commanding then was Colonel, just get his name, sorry, Colonel Mortimer, Dion Mortimer, and the RSM was Sergeant Major Lloyd Carlett. All names that people will remember. I think there was a Commandant Venter, who was the 2IC of the infantry school. The infantry school was then, now here comes the difficult part, and I want people to try and help us once they see this. But Lee Leclerc and myself, with Tony Savadis and Fred Ulschich in the past week, we put our heads together, and we think this is what it looked like when the infantry school started in 74, with the old gymnasium becoming part of that training. There were two wings. The one was the National Servicemen Leader Group Training Wing. I think then Major Joop Joubert was the commander of that one, is what we think. They had different companies, and those companies would train the national servicemen to become junior leaders, either corporals or second lieutenants or assistant field cornets. Then you had the other wing of the infantry school, which was called the tactical wing, TAC wing. That TAC wing, we think, was Bill Suss, was the commander. Tony Savadis was there as well. And that TAC wing was divided into a conventional branch where Tony Savadis was and where Lee Leclerc and I were dealt into. Then you had a counter-insurgency branch, and then you had a weapons branch. That's where you did all your weapon training. And separately, you had a permanent force part 1 wing. And later on, funny enough, in 1974, one Recce started in the lines of the infantry school with Commandant Jan Breitenbach as the founder commander of one Recce. He was also in our lines in Oudtshoorn. And my old gym buddy, Malcolm Kinghorn, was his first adjutant. And of course, from there, they went to Durban, and that was the line that the Recces took. But that was all part of the infantry school base then. I don't want to mention the names of the guys that came down, but when I'm finished, I'm going to put it in my written memoirs that I can remember. Now, I'm not going to say the names, but ek gaan iemand se naam uitlos. And they're old friends of mine. They've been old friends of mine for 50 years. And die hel gaan los wees as ek een naam uitlos. So I'm going to first make sure that they get back onto the comments on this little chat of yours to say, hey, Harris, I was there. Nou kan ek al die name collate en by mekaar sit en sê, okay, now we haven't hurt anybody's feelings. But what I can remember was, sonder om windgat te klink, what a dynamic bunch of junior and senior officers of the infantry were part of that establishment in 1974. I shall never forget them. And the stuff that we learned there was just unbelievable. So Lee Leclerc and I are off to the conventional branch. And Lee reminds me, by the way, we trained the citizen force regiments. The Springs Regiment, the Western Province Regiment, the Cape Town Highlanders, the Cape Town Rifles. You see that I'm mentioning names again because there were 50 others as well. So ek is al klaar in die moeilikheid. But Lee and I were to do with the training of the citizen force, company commanders and platoon commanders. And Lee reminds me the other day that a company commander from Cape Town Highlanders, Lieutenant Tony Mariner, who eventually became the officer commanding of Cape Town Highlanders, we heard then that Sam Browns, you know the Sam Browns, had been stopped. It was a British tradition, we're not wearing Sam Browns anymore. And these citizen force regiments on that course, somewhere in 74, were up in arms. And there was a big to-do about this, that eventually it was decided the Sam Brown and sword, excuse me, would still be used by the citizen force regiments. And that little discussion, according to Lee, I remember it well, started off in 1974 for people that are interested in that. Then we come to 1975. In the beginning of that year, the July intake also started doing training. Now, there were two intakes for National Service junior leaders. You had January intakes, and then you had July intakes. And the first July intakes in the infantry school were housed out in the training area at the place they named Kansas City. Now, the Kansas City came from, on the map, you'll see that area where their base was established, on the map staan daar Kansas-vlakte. So the Kansas-vlakte became Kansas City. All intents, not in buildings. In the winter, July intake, Oudtshoorn. Swartberge lay by jou, toe van die sneeu. Was not funny. A lot of people will remember that. Somewhere during 1975, the first half, Roland de Vries was the major. I was the 2IC, and Sergeant Major Jack Pierce, who everybody will know, was the company sergeant major at Kansas City. All intents. I remember there was something like 100 tents in this tent camp, and Jack Pierce used to love doing fire drill. Fire drill beteken if the alarm goes off, you run to your tent and dan skop jy die middelpaal uit. Dan val al die tente plat. You see all these tents, 100 tents in unison falling flat to the ground, was something that will always stay with me. But that was my first half of 75. I was with Kansas City. Then in the middle of the year, June, July, I went on a promotion course, a group commander's course, major to commandant's course. I can't remember what they called it, but I'm sure a lot of people will help me. And that was a 4-5 months course at the end of 75. So daar sit ons op ons kursus in die college in Pretoria, Voortrekkerhoogte. And one Friday, 6 of us are called out of the class and told to report to Army headquarters to then Brigadier Jannie Geldenhuys, who later on became the Defence Force OC. We duly reported there, and he told us certain things which I'm not going to go into now, but that operation that if we were interested in, would be called Operation Savannah. That was now the middle of 75. We had to talk to our wives back home to say that we would be away a little bit longer than what the course would have been. We were sworn to secrecy for obvious reasons. And obviously nobody said, we're not going to go. So the 6 of us, all then captains, James Hills, Gert Koetser, Johnny Koetser, later on 2IC, or the Deputy Chief of the Army, Johan Holm, killed in Savannah, Norris Crooks, Gert Grobler, ons het hom Gert Hond genoem, because he was the first commander of the dog school. So sy naam was Gert Hond geweest. And myself, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6 of us departed and went to Runtu. We arrived there. Other people besides us 6 had already arrived in Runtu. And a long story, all this stuff, by the way, is on paper. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But we arrived there, we were issued with uniforms. All the Savannah Oaks will remember this. There were green Zaire uniforms with flat-soled funny boots and R1 rifles without numbers on. We had to take everything off, even your Colgate tandepasta moes skoongemaak gewees het. There was no indication that we had come from South Africa. Now, this is not state secrets anymore. What I'm telling you now are in how many umpteen books, papers, interviews. The first books that came out was with these type of books. What was her name? Sophia Dupree. And then you had Professor F.J. de Toy Spies. He came out with these books. There's a lot of other books. Where are they? I want to tell you quickly. Books that are available for people to read. There's a Operation Savannah, the Troops' Diaries. It's 2 volumes written by a national serviceman. They're already out there with all this information on. The Failure of Op Savannah by Miguel Jr. is out there. Oom Jan Breitenbach's Forged in Battle. They live by the sword. There's photos on Op Savannah 75, 76 under construction. There's still photos of that. I'm going to send you a couple of. So there's a lot of books that tells you about Op Savannah, the order of the battle groups, Battle Group Zulu, Bravo, Foxbat, Orange, X-Ray. There's a staff paper by a Major Sherman Skerman, about the Battle of Ebo. It's also there. His facts aren't 100% correct, but that happens over time. He brought that paper out in August of 2015. There's a lot of detailed facts in there. So the stuff is out there. I'm not telling you now any state secrets. So there we are. We're all ready to go. So many things happened. We waited for about 2 weeks before something actually happened. And then on a morning, 2 Dakotas, early morning, as the sun rises, James Hughes is the commander of our little group that is going to Serpa Pinto. Serpa Pinto is now Mononk. It was myself that I can remember, plus Gert Koetser and Gert Grobler and a few others. That's the guys that were on our course. And we had to report to Serpa Pinto to go and train ELNA forces, FNLA forces. Now, you remember FNLA, Holden Roberto was the commander. He was in the north, and he had a guy in the south called Daniel Chipenda. And Daniel Chipenda actually played soccer for Angola. He was quite a mover, this Daniel guy. But anyway, off we went with sacks of meal and weapons and other logistics. And we landed at Serpa Pinto and moved further out to a place, I think about 7 kilometers out, called Escola de Valambo. Now, Escola de Valambo is the school. Valambo, it was a technical school. And that's where we moved in. And Daniel Chipenda brought the southern groups of, or part of the southern groups of FNLA or ELNA, brought to Escola de Valambo, and there we trained them. There were guys like a lot of instructors. Frank Besbier, that's Andre's brother. Major Frank Besbier. He was our commander at Serpa Pinto. We had guys like Basil Duke Norris, who was then a sergeant. He trained the Vickers machine guns, and so we had all our bunch together there. Little interesting story. We were busy at Serpa Pinto, training at the Escola de Valambo, when along comes 26 SWAPO soldiers, planned soldiers. They thought that this was, home territory. They actually walked into us lot. And they, without a shot being fired, we captured 26 SWAPO planned fighters. which I'm sure a lot of people can remember. The other two groups went to Johnny Kutzer and Johan Holm, that was on course with me, and Holly Holsthausen. They all went to not Santa Comba, to Silver Porto, where they also trained UNITA soldiers on the same time that we were training Elna down at Serpa Pinto. There was a third one, which was obviously Jan Breitenbach's. He was training the other Elna forces at Mapupa, the Mapupa base. So the training of all UNITA and FNLA for Op Savannah was at Mapupa and Serpa Pinto and at Silver Porto. And I think the commander at Silver Porto was Eddie Webb. I might be wrong on that one, but all these books will give you that detail. I just want to tell you where I fitted in. Right, so we had caught our 26 Swapo and we carried on with all the training. We hadn't completed the training yet when Gert Grobler, he had a full company of 3 platoons. I had a company of 2 platoons. And we had to join Task Force Zulu. At that stage, Colonel van Heerden had taken over and Jan Breitenbach had his bunch that had already taken Sadabandera and Mosammedis when we joined them. And Gert and I had to still ons met vuurtjies trek. Who's going to stay behind at Sadabandera at the airport and who's going to join Jan Breitenbach and Task Force Zulu, Colonel van Heerden. Needless to say, and that's how it works, Gert drew the correct match and he joined Zulu and I had to stay at Sadabandera and look after the airport for about, must have been 4 or 5 weeks. Interesting stories came out there. I think Sadabandera is now called Labango. That is die dorpie met die Christusbeeld. Beautiful little up on the escarpment. Die Sadabandera. And there we were. We protected Sadabandera itself, although Jan Breitenbach had passed through there already. And Mosammedis on the coast. Mosammedi is now known as Namib. And the commander that was sent from Army headquarters was Commandant Louis Heap. A lot of people will remember Commandant Louis Heap. He actually stayed in the Grand Hotel de Hoyla, which was still operating in Sadabandera, while we were roughing it at the airport. When we arrived at Sadabandera, there were still aircraft standing there. 2 or 3 Aztec aircrafts, the double props, and a little blood red training aircraft. I'll never forget that. I'll tell a quick story about that now. Eventually, they took the Aztec aircrafts, the Air Force took those captured Aztec aircrafts back to Pretoria. But Louis Heap one day, because there's not much happening, Louis Heap decides that he wants to see if this little red aeroplane is still operating. The ailerons had been shot up. Jan Breitenbach had die aeroplanes 'n bietjie seer gemaak. But the engine was still operating. Sadabandera had a aanloopbaan, a runway of about almost 2 kilometers long. And Louis Heap, being the adventurous type, climbed into this little aeroplane. And he couldn't take off because of the ailerons, but he was giving it all he could. He'd get airborne and then hopping all the way to the bottom and hopping all the way back. And obviously, as Murphy's Law would have, the petrol ran out when he was on the other side, 2 kilometers away. Toe moes hy weer terugloop lughawe toe hoog de dondere. That was Louis Heap's contribution, I remember. He was later on, who came in his place? Boy de Toy took over from Louis Heap. That's what I can remember. Then the weapons were coming back. Remember now, Zulu is going up the west coast. They went through Mosammedis. Then it was what's it, Lubito, Benguela, Nova Redondo. You'll find it all in the books. They were doing their thing up there with a Rommel type action, just bulldozing all their way up. And all the weapons and stuff that were coming back from with the log supplies to Zulu were being packed into massive hangars at Sadabandera. Now, whatever happened to those weapons later on, I don't know, but it was an assortment of Russian armory that you could not believe. Well, we were looking after all that and sending them back south to Ruakana. Then on the 11th of November, history tells you 1975, the Portuguese moved out of Angola and out of Mozambique. The vehicles that stayed behind, remember, I'm going to tell you that all of the South African forces were making use of mainly groentetrokke, vegetable trucks, because there were trucks standing around all over there after the Portuguese just left. There was enough vehicles there to have another 4 or 5 battalions going. So my bunch can remember the groentetrokke. You had Mercedes Benzes and Scanias and all types of different, would you call it, captured vehicles. But there went the Portuguese. It's very sad. There's a lot written in the books about how they all moved, the civilians moved down to Ruakana and so on, the refugees. Another story completely. But what I can remember is sitting at the airport one day, a Citroen, you know, these Citroen type motor cars. It was a brown motor car arrived at the airport. And an old lady climbed out and came and wanted to know who was in command and came into my office at the airport. She was still dressed in a black dress, so a wit frilletjies hierso. And she said that her and her husband had farmed up on the escarpment with horses. Is groot perrewêreld bo op die escarpement. Op die plateaurand, laat ek dit so stel. Excuse me, and they had a beach house in Lubito. And could she please move forward with a log supply to Zulu to go and say goodbye to her husband when he was buried in Lubito and see if their little sea cottage was still standing there. And then on the way back, she wanted to go back to the farm to see what was left of the farm, and then she would return, having made peace with her husband, back to Southwest Africa. And I said to the old lady, Tannie, gaan met. She praat Afrikaans, by the way. Toe sê ek nou, hoe is dit nou dat Tannie nou Afrikaans praat? En sy sê, nee, my seun, ons is die afstammelinge van die Doslandtrekkers, wat daar in daai wêreld ingetrek het. En sy wil net vir haar man gaan goodbye sê. And about a week or 10 days later, she actually came back, said goodbye, and off she went. Can I have a drink of water first, please? Koos, soos ek jou gesê het, ek het op die kop nou 'n jaar terug het ek COVID gehad en het my longe aangetas. En ek het nou net voor die skoolvakansies weer so 3 dae gelê. So this is possibly a little bit of, what do you call it, post-COVID that I've got here. But thank God we all made that lot. Then I remember moving from Sadabandera with some of my FNLA troops and 2 sections of paratroopers with a Sergeant Lombard in command of the paratroopers. Later became the RSM. I don't think he's with us anymore. And we moved down to Mosammedis on the coast. What a beautiful part of Africa that is. Because at Sadabandera, you're up on the plateau, and then you go down the escarpment, 4,000 foot. You go down the famous Liba Pass. Absolutely amazing. I think the Italians were building it. In the middle of the pass, it still hadn't been completed yet. But down the Liebe Pass we went on the same route that Jan Breitenbach had used when he captured Mosammedis. But this is now after 11 November. So we get there to the harbour. Beautiful natural harbour, Namib. I'm not exaggerating when I say that the quay, the wharf, the jetty, must have been about 1.5 kilometers long, which obviously it still is. And stacked on that 1.5 kilometer wharf, as high as you can imagine, was all the household possessions of the civilian Portuguese that had returned by aircraft to Portugal, to Lisbon. You just can't imagine the stuff. Enige ding wat in jou huis kan hê, yskaste, stowwe. There were vehicles, there was something like 6 or 7 BMWs that were there. There were these little yellow Suzuki vehicles that were there. They were stuck there because they couldn't go on the Benguela railway line to Zambia. All stuck there in the harbour at Mosammedis. We stayed there for a while. They still had a quartel, a fort at Mosammedis. They also had a quartel at Santa Bandera. There were still Portuguese guys there. And what an amazing place that was. I remember there was a grain ship in the harbour. And the captain had a big red beard. And when he saw us arrive there, he came running down the gangplank and said, "Are you in control of this area?" So being a little windgat captain, I said, "Yes, I'm the operational commander of the province of Douala. How can I help you, sir?" And he said, I'm supposed to load this grain off here, but I need a signature. So I said, "Well, where's your papers?" And he brought me the papers and I signed for all that, but he did. He loaded the grain off and off he went again. Famous little stories that I can remember of Mosammedis. Then after about 5 or 6 weeks, I get the instruction to join Foxbat. Remember Zulu is going up the west? Foxbat is now in the middle. They are now in Cela, C-E-L-A. Books are full of all of this. I was given a little piece of paper, a little card with a stamp on it, called Livre Transito, which means a pass. I can now Livre Transito, I can now go. Livre Transito to Capitão Jock. I'm now in the command of these 2.5 platoons at the airport. And I'm told to move up the center of Angola, past Nova Lisboa, Huambo, and to join Commandant George Kreis and Foxbat at Cela. So off we go. Very interesting. Because remember, UNITA didn't like FNLA very much. All the roadblocks we went through, that little Livre Transito, het ons gehelp om daarom by Cela uiteindelik uit te kom. Just before Cela, there's a little shop, there's a little village called Santa Comba. And as we arrived, came towards Santa Comba with our vegetable trucks stacked to the top, ready for action, you could still smell the paus. Even the pau, hierdie buns, Portuguese paus. There was still a bakery operating at Santa Comba. And that I'll never forget. We had picked up a lot of escudos and stuff along the way that meant nothing anymore. But we had trommels of notes. And the owner of that little place said, we walked in, we said, "We want to buy all the bread that you've got here." And he mentioned some other price in escudos, I think it is. So we just loaded off a couple of trommels of the stuff and said, "Daar sê, soek net jou buns asseblief." And I'll never forget that evening. Apparently, to those troops, it's a delicacy. They slaughtered a pig just outside in our base, just outside Santa Comba on the way to Cela. And the delicacy is the pig's testicles, which I didn't know. And I was brought, as the company commander, I was brought one of these warm pows with pig's testicles on it. And of course, I had to eat it, so I ate it, and everybody gave me the greatest round of applause until I heard what it was. But I could say it's nog al a delicacy, hoor. It's not too bad at all. These are little stories. Then I had Corporal Diedrichs, Andre Diedrichs. Now, Andre Diedrichs, Colonel Andre Diedrichs, Norris Cook Silvers or whatever it was, of Bridge 14 fame, and then became later on a very famous recce operator. Great guy. Quiet, goeie boerseun. Hy is een van daai tipes, hy kan sommer môre met een van my dogters trou. Jy weet, hy is een van daai manne. Ordentlike knaap. I became very attached to old Diddy's. He was a great little leader. And Warrant Officer Jeff Burger, who was a paratrooper, he also joined me in that area, although Diddy's was with me from Sadamandera times. There we were now, we joined Foxbat. Of course, you would by stop op 'n stadium as jy dink dit gaan te lank, hoor. There's Foxbat. The books will tell you there's a lot of drama and critique about this. That after Jan Holm and them had got to Ebo, moved back, it started raining, the rivers stopped us on another move towards Ebo and further to Gabela and to Conde on the way to Luanda. And there we lay for about 8 days, I can't remember, at the flooded river, where the enemy aircraft, reconnaissance aircraft actually came over us, and they obviously knew where we were. But to cut a long story short, Sunday, the 23rd of November 1975, we eventually had bridges built across these flooded rivers, and in we moved. Johan Holm was the battle group commander that I was part of. I had my 2.5 platoons of Elna troops, and there was another company of UNITA that had come with Johan and them because they trained the UNITA guys. UNITA was still riding around in buses. But anyway, there we went. Now, I'm not going to give my criticism, but I think logic tells you that you had been fighting against MPLA all the way through up to where we were then, with hardly any resistance. We stuck around for 7 days and thought, but we're going to do it again. So let's go. And that was the mistake that led to the Battle of Ebo. Just before we went in on that Sunday morning, the previous day, Major Henny Schulz, Captain Anton Fourie, and a lot of others arrived and joined Commandant Klaus's Foxbat with the idea of taking over from us that had been there now a good couple of months already. So they were already there. I can remember them arriving then, you could smell their aftershave because we weren't used to aftershave. Not aftershave, let's say just soap. But they went in with us. And the idea was that after we had got to Conde or to Gabela, whatever one, we would then all go back to the States, as we used to say. So when we went in on the 23rd of November, we were doubled up. Henny Schulz was with Holly. What was the guy that came that was going to take over from me? I'll get his name now. Willie Strydom was going to take over from me. And there we went. It was a strange battle organization because normally you won't have the armored cars leading the advance on a road only because you couldn't move until it just rained. you wouldn't have the mortars moving as far ahead as they were. But they had no option because they didn't have fire control in front of them. They had to fire to where they could see. And here went this strange battle order until we got to the Mabasa River. Is it the Mabasa River? Yeah, I think it's the Mabasa River. We got to the Mabasa River and all hell broke loose. I'm going to send you with the photos for this conversation. I'm going to send you the map of Ebo, and you will see to the west there's high ground called Dongdo and Luanda. You'll see the Mabasa River. The poor armored cars took a lot of flak. That's all in the books. I remember moving with my company directly behind the mortars, about 75 meters behind the mortars, protecting the mortars. When they got to the Mabasa River, the armored cars got to the Mabasa River, all hell broke loose, especially here from our left-hand side, in other words, our western side. And I know in these books, Didis, that was with me, also still says that he could see that they were firing at us directly with RPGs. And of course, the 122 millimeter Stalin organs of Roy Oor were raining down on us like it was out of fashion. Funny, soldiers don't talk about this detail. So it's difficult to try and set the scene of what happened there. Almost as if your brain is protecting you when you run into trauma like that, where you see people lying around you in the condition that they were. But I lost 7 troops there. At the mortars, Sergeant Major Benson was killed instantly. Stasi Steenkamp, who Benson would have relieved, he got very seriously injured. His actions there at the Mabasa actually earned him, very rightfully so, the honoris causa for bravery. I lost 7. The UNITA company lost about 25. So in total, we must have lost infantrymen. We must have lost between 30 and 40 troops at the Battle of Ebo. And Didis and I had our hands full trying to get our FNLA troops moving back slowly and not just getting up and running away, because that's how the majority of the UNITA troops were killed. They just started running, and you can't blame them because I suppose you can. They're not trained to just run away. But anyway, they were overawed by it all. And that, of course, is, as the history tells you, we ran into the Cubans with the forces of MPLA. And then the history thereafter had nothing to do with that. But we moved back. Didis and I had our hands full getting these troops back. I remember getting back, I was hoarser than I am now, shouting and screaming to tell the people, because you could clearly see when the salvos were coming. And as you thought, here's a gap, you'd move back 100 meters and wait for it to come again, and so on. Enough of that. But not a nice day. We also lost Johan Holm there. I'm not going to go into that. And that night we landed up at the cheese factory and the pig farm, where we took stock of what had just happened. Jan Buitenbach arrived there, hoogte donderen that his troops, his FNLA troops, were in the condition that they were, because we had a lot of wounded. We lost the 7, but we had a lot of wounded. And then we moved back to Sela on the Monday, the 24th. There at Sela was the runway and the headquarters and the hospital. Amazing stories about that. Didi stayed behind because now the new guys took over. And those of us that went in originally, we left the Monday or the Tuesday. And on the same aircraft that the first National Servicemen troops came in to Savannah. 5SAI was still on from Walvis Bay. Their aircraft still came in and we flew back. The original team still flew back on their aircraft back to Waterkloof. My old buddy Leon Wessels nearly lost his arm, his left arm, the battle that took place earlier at Santa Comba. And a great personal friend of mine from 5SAI, also on that course, Dan Taljaard, unmarried Dan Taljaard. He was in the aircraft with Second Lieutenant Williamson and I get his name now. Here it comes, Thompson, the two lieutenants, and Dan, Dainkie Taljaard. They were aboard when they were shot down at Ebo. When we got back to Celle, we only found out that the aircraft had not landed yet. And that was a story on its own. I just remember that General Gert Opperman, very many years later, played a major role in getting their remains back. They'd been shot down and they crashed just, I think it was northeast of Ebo. And the Tallies wasn't there, but Leon said to me, before Tallies took off on that aircraft, he knew that there were troops coming in, that he gave Leon 6 letters to his fiancée. That's the Dan Taljaard's fiancée, verloofde. And I was now on my way back to Waterkloof, and Leon still gave me those 6 letters and said that the headquarters in Celle had already told his fiancée via Pretoria that the aircraft was missing. So we returned, landed at Waterkloof, and I still slept at the college that night. The same college that I'd left with the courses. Everybody on that course was already deployed somewhere with Savannah. So the college was donker. Nobody was moving there. And they still put me up. I said I wanted to go and sleep in my bed, and I slept in before I went off on Savannah. And I was sleeping in one of the buildings called Lucan. Guys listening to this will remember the 2 buildings, Mens and Lucan. And the duty officer of the college came and knocked on my door and said to me that Dan's fiancée and her family are outside, and I had to give the 6 letters that I brought back. I had to give to his fiancée, which of course was profound, to say the least. So that was the story. Now we're back in Pretoria. My wife comes and fetches me, Ina, from the infantry school. That's why I'm telling you this now, because I'm still at the infantry school. She comes to fetch me. We go back. And just after Christmas, a knock on the door at home in Oudtshoorn. My OC, personally, Colonel Mortimer, says, Jock, you guys didn't know that, but why you were relieved, besides the fact that you'd been there for that long, you're now returning. And you are now going to help train the citizen force regiments that are now going to move into Angola as part of Operation Savannah. there was a commandant, I got his name here, S.W.J. Kotzer. He was a gunner. Him and Holsthausen and Johnny Kutzer, myself, it was a team of about 20. We had to return and find a place north of the red line, which is Grootfontein North, where we could train these citizen force regiments. And I remember us moving under the leadership of this Commandant Kotze to the red line. Die rooi lyn het sy naam gekry vir back and claw man en sulke goeters. Weet diere back and claw. And we arrived there and it was raining. Remember, Savannah is still happening now, but we coming out after a break, we're moving forward again. And we slept there at the police station by die rooi lyn se hek. And the next morning, toe het opgehou reën het, we looked left. There was a massive amount of water. And we looked right or east, and there the road was still rideable. And hierdie Commandant Kotze vat ons almal, and down the road on the east we go, for about, say, 15 kilometers. And on the map, we find a place that you could see. This is going to be a nice place to put these citizen force regiments into. And we decide, there it is. And on the map, it was called Oshivelo. And that was the founding of the Oshivelo training base that was used for so many years later thereafter. We all used to use Oshivelo. So we were there at Oshivelo. We trained the regiments as they came in. Cape Town Highlanders, Cape Town Rifles, Springs, you name it. We did little toots and exercises with them and told them how the Cubans and these guys would move and blah, 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 blah. And that was the end in 76, early 76, January. At the end of Savannah, we also moved back again. So I had the honor of being part of Savannah and of training people to go into Savannah. And that was it. The rest you're going to be able to read in the books. I got promoted to major on the 1st of January 1976. And toe ek terugkom by die infantry school, toe word E-company gestig. The 5th company. The July intake. It actually took the place of the old Kansas City, if I'm not mistaken. I was appointed the commander of the new E company. My 2IC was a Captain Roy Erasmus. And my CSM company sergeant major was Sergeant Major Stone. And later on, my CQMS was Staff Sergeant Chris Skitter. A lot of people can remember these names. Then during 76, we carried on. We did our training. We also went to Oshivelo with E Company, company on its own from the infantry school. And I also remember later on Fred Ulschig became my 2IC of E Company in Roy Erasmus's place when I went on staff course. Now, these dates aren't 100% accurate. It's 50 years ago. But I can remember when I took the E Company to Oshivelo, we were then eventually deployed operationally for about 3 months, just west of Congo, a place called Opapela. So we at Opapela, dug in company base, and the story I can remember is they were then building in 76, 77, they were building the Chandelier Road. That's the old Umveliese pad. And funny enough, there was a company in Angola just before Savannah that was called Levonc. I might have this the wrong way around. Levonc, road construction. And when they came down into South Africa in 77, they just changed the name around to Novel C. Levon became Novel. And I remember sitting there one day and building that chandelier road. It was with this white powder they built it as part of the road construction. And these trucks that were riding up, it was one white cloud over the chandelier. And two of the construction vehicles, one overtook the other and ran head in onto one of those coming from the other side. And one of the owners of this Novel C or Levon C, a Portuguese guy by the name of Ferreira, he was killed instantly. And I remember Chris Kitter still had to go down and see what he could do from our little base in Opapela. That takes me, Chris, to 1977, the end of. Now, in 78, I wasn't at the infantry school because I went on course 7803, staff course, the Army staff course, from January to December. Now, that in itself, I'm going to make you the offer, either myself or one of the other prolific guys that were on course with me. You can ask him about that 78 staff course because it was the start of a new type of staff course. So it was very interesting. The things that we did there were quite amazing. But you and I could talk about that later on. But for me to go in now is going to be another hour and a half just on that amazing course of 1978. Then in 1979, I returned back at the infantry school, back to the tactical wing, carrying on with the training of permanent force members. And in 1980, I got promoted to commandant. That's why I said I was there in the school for 3 ranks, captain, major, and commandant. And it was my honor to form the courses company. It used to be known as the tactical wing of blood. That was called the courses company. I was the company commander as a commandant. I had a CSM by the name of Sergeant S.C. Nell, who I'd known for many, many years. I had an administrative officer called Lieutenant Victor, and my instructors were Captain F.J.G. Smith, and I had Lieutenants M.J.P. van Sail and H.C. Meyer. And we would then be training. That was the start of, as I've said, the courses company. One of the courses that we gave was battle handling. It's not the tactical side, it's the battle handling side. The principles of the defense, the principles of the advance, that sort of a thing. Telephone battles, tactical exercises with our troops. My last year at the school, I had the honor of presenting that to unit commanders. And funny enough, one of the students on that course in 1980 was Commandant, same rank as I, Eddie Viljoen, who I had taken over 32 Battalion from, or would do rather, in a couple of years' time. Then I heard that I had now been considered and given the job as the officer commanding of 5 South African Infantry Battalion in Ladysmith. That's going to be my next talk. So I'm now in 1980, but I want to finish off this one. Ek moet daarom sê ek is verskriklik dankbaar as ek so terugdink. Veral as die son sak en jy vat so 'n paar whiskietjies. And you think back of these things that you have forced me now to accelerate in getting onto paper. Amazing people that whose lives crossed my path, who I am so terribly grateful for. My commanders at the infantry school, Dion Mortimer, Witko Badenhorst, Wessel Kritzinger, who was the 2IC. He became the officer commanding of infantry school when I left. When I went to 5SAI, he took over as OC of the infantry school. 'n paar laaste herinneringe. I see there are Facebooks of all types of groups of national service when I mentioned them last time, which I'm so grateful it's taking place now, because a lot of things are coming through that you could collate and put together as the years go on. I hope it doesn't take years, or somewhere in maanden doen. I must say a lot of the national service Facebooks don't necessarily have all the facts right of what happened in the headquarters side. But what I appreciate about them, straight down, honest, typische troeptaal ook. They talk about their time when they were in the army. The majority of them are those that would say that I used to say, the best year or 2 years in your life that you never want to do again. But it changed boys into men. And I was now on my way to 5SAI to take part in that metamorphosis of our youth in those days. But a few little memories, excuse me. I remember Chuppies' restaurant at the infantry school. I remember myself and my wife Ina and Sergeant Major Gerry Venter and his wife Honey. He's passed on, unfortunately. When Commandant Kritzinger was still the 2IC, he appointed us four, to look after the Christmas things for the kids at the infantry school. And the parents used to give money for presents. And the four of us for 2 years used to go down to Cape Town. En net soos 'n klomp kinders onsself, het ons vir die verskillende ouderdomsgroepe, het ons nou Kersgeskenkies gekoop vir 'n movie se Kersstorie. Father Christmases and you name it. That's also things I can remember. I want to be sending you a couple of photos of that. Photos of our lecture rooms. All the students through the years will remember lecture rooms like Alamein and Badia. Those were the two main lecture rooms. Sand models that you could build. Massive sliding chalk boards that you could use that old Bill Suss used to be so good on. I remember a character by the name of Peter Waterfall. Peter Waterfall was a master shot skit. He had actually won the Queen's Medal when we still had Commonwealth Games. And I remember one day him on the Swartberg range, him and Cassie Kasselman, who was a Springbok shot. Cassie on the R1 or R4, I can't remember, and Peter Waterfall on the .303. And that old man's handling of that 303 as a Queen's Medal recipient was unbelievable. Hy skiet net so bly die vinnig soos wat ou Cassie geskiet het. Those are things that runs through my mind. The same Peter Waterfall became our quartermaster at the infantry school. And he used to say, you must look after your equipment. And I remember one of the courses that I was presenting, at the end of the course, we handed back our equipment, and one of our radios, I had lost the gooseneck. Now, the gooseneck on the radio is a flexible thing that can make the aerial move properly. And I had to pay in R5 because the gooseneck was gone. And when I went back to go and get the next course's equipment, all the radios were laid out there, excepting one gooseneck. There was a rolled up R5 note lying there. He said, that's what I'm issuing you with, because young Harris, you don't look after your equipment properly. So he taught me that important lesson of looking after your equipment. I remember the training area, the 2 shooting ranges, the fire initiation range, Vuurdoopbaan, Luiperdskloof, the North Gate, the South Gate. I remember when still with Colonel Dion Mortimer's time, and a lot of guys are going to smile at this now, we had a hippie party at the One Shooting Ranges Club. That hippie party is something that people are still talking about 50 years later. I remember when you arrived there, they gave you 2 pilletjies, but you know, look, like the hippies used to do. And we found out later on, die 2 pilletjies was eintlik maar Bob Barton's honde pilletjies geweest. Long stories. I remember a guy, RB Dupree, he was told by Witko Barnhorst to lay out a 2,4 track for us that went up over the hill behind the school. And that track was called the RB route. And every Friday onder Holly Holsthausen, all the PFs had to run the 2,4 on a Friday afternoon voor ons almal kroeg toe getrek het en die week se drama met 'n paar goeie biere weggesluk het. Great memories. RB route. The statue at the infantry school's entrance, that was erected days before I left to go to 5SAI. I remember a very famous soccer game that took place amongst the staff members of the infantry school. I'm going to send you a photo of that, where it was the doers against the talkers. We said the commandant and his bunch were the talkers, and us instructors were the doers. And if you put it on long enough and people can zoom in, you'll be able to see the names there, because the doers beat the talkers. En daar sit Stasie Steenkamp, wat so seer gekry het by Ebo. Daar sit hy nog met die trofee wat ons gewen het, as the doers of that famous soccer game. Then, I remember too, in 1980, my last year, when the Lions toured here, I used to go down with friends of mine to go and watch the test in Nieuweland and die toets hier, die 12-9 reëntoets hier in PE. En saam met my was my ou pel, hy's nou dag oorlede, André Dupree, the then head of the sick bay, en hy's nog steeds op Kimberley. Hy het nou sy eie medie set-up in Kimberley. Ag, in Oudtshoorn, ekskuus tog. Dr. Wessel Vermeulen. Wessel, as jy hierdie kyk, ek het jou telefoonnommer. Ek gaan na al hierdie jare, gaan ek weer met jou kontak maak oor hierdie rugbywedstryde wat ons altyd gaan kyk. AB Landman was die tandarts. Groot pel van my. Hy was die ander ou, en dan Peer Skoeman was 'n groot boer gewees daar by Skoemanspoort. As jy uitgaan van Oudtshoorn af, Kangogrotte toe. Those rugby matches, Springboks Lions, I'll also never ever forget. And of course, that's it. I've got so many others, we're talking too much now. This is supposed to be conversations, although I see, jy kry nie eintlik 'n woord in and sideways nie, maar ek wil afsluit om te sê, Tony Savannah and I spoke about it yesterday, part of this research. And we agree that the caliber of the ladies that we married was just unbelievable. They were a special breed of ladies. You must remember, they sat down, they told you over the telephone, jou kind het nou al die eerste stappe geneem. Jy's op college, op kursus in die college, of jy's 4 maande in die bos, of jy's 6 maande in Angola, or whatever. But for those that made it, ladies, we want to say thank you very much. You're all a special breed of lady. And then the next time I see you, Koos, I'll take you to Ladysmith, Natal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I must tell you quite a few things. In the first place, we're very grateful that you survived COVID, even if you have a wonderful voice now. I suppose you can become some kind of a crooner, all of these singers. It will work very well.
Survived only because of ivermectin and God's grace.
And God's grace, sir. We thank him as well. And I do want to make an episode actually about the females. Die vrouwenvereniging, I don't know what it's in English. I know that the army or the Wehrmacht, the defense force had quite a big.
Army Ladies Association, LDV, Leerdamesvereniging.
Well, that's it. That's exactly those people. If there's any of them listening here, please come and talk to us. But I have a question to you, sir. You can answer me or not. I've heard about this soccer game of yours. This one with the doers and the talkers. Now I have to ask you straight, sir, were there perhaps any cheating or improvising on your side, on the side of the doers, to win that game?
No comment.
Well,
Yes, but there was.
the fact is, read the scoreboard. I think that's all we have to say. Because I do know that the army and the police were trained to absolutely never lose. I mean, you can be caught with a goat somewhere, but you don't lose. That's just the thing. I'm looking forward actually to next week as well, because I really think that a lot of us, most of us actually fully remember how you feel when you walk into a basic training establishment. You've heard the stories, and they were fairly substantial in nightmare proportions of what's going to happen to you here. And you see the commandant, the colonel there on the other side. He's like God himself, you know. You you don't even realize the man is a human. Never that he can be a father and a husband. That doesn't come up in your thoughts at all. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how you would, as a senior officer now, you know, you have this responsibility of taking care of these young men who's arriving there from all sides of life, as you explained in one of the videos. You guys from Durban were there.
Massive responsibility. But you'll hear about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, sir, because I would ask you, did that make you old? Do you feel that responsibility as a senior officer?
Oh, yes, you do. You do. And it's a lonely position. It's a lonely position to have. You know, you've got to make the final decisions. But as I've said before, with the grace of God, you got through that. You got through that. Amazing experiences.
Really looking forward to that. And for the rest of you, sadly, by the time you listen here, I've heard it already. So we're really enjoying your conversation, sir. It is a conversation. I don't need to talk. You're talking directly to your people here. And I'm just the medium. The less I say, actually, the better the episode in my eyes. People are here to see you, not me. But for all of you out there, if you have a story, please come and tell us, especially the Savannah men. I am creating a Savannah playlist here where we're going to put all the episodes of Savannah. I think it was a major turn point in South Africa's history. We will have to get the experts in to explain to us exactly why we went into Angola. And of course, the treachery of the US, which we need to explain as well. There were some winking at the background. Even the Black African leaders, they were also approaching, I believe, Mr. Foster and asking him to intervene here, and exactly what happened in Angola in those years. And it was the right military doctrine as well. If you want to fight, then have a fight as far away from your own people as possible. But these things we will answer in due course. So thank you, sir. Really appreciate this. For the rest of you, please come and talk to me. You're welcome here. Everybody is welcome. Doesn't matter what rank, doesn't matter what race, doesn't matter to me what unit. And I don't care if you're male or female, doesn't matter to us. Let's just get the legacy together so that we can get our story out there. People can listen to us. And until we meet again, God bless.